All right, I've been having a really great time playing around with this photo stamping technique. And I have another photograph here. I found a whole pack of them, and I just don't know where they came from, but the guy that developed this technique of stamping on photographs was named Randall Curry, and he sold packs of photographs at one point in time. So I'm wondering if he gave me a pack or something like that, or I purchased a pack from him. Because I do remember him being at some convention that I was at, so I don't know if that's where they came from, but if they are, thank you, Randall, for your contributions to the stamping community, and if these are your photos, thank you for your photos. Alright, now I'm going to do a scene using this lighthouse right here, and I'm going to address a couple of the issues that I find with photo stamping. Two of those things are containment. After I stamp this image, it doesn't, or the scenes, it doesn't seem to have like a strong sense of containment and framing. Okay, so I'm going to try to add in some tone around the edges right in here, just to kind of put a little bit of a vignette framing around this piece. And then dimension is another one of those things that comes into play. So that's why in my first couple experiments, I'm adding some additional tone after I stamp out my imagery. And then I want things to be a little bit more three-dimensional, so I'm going to try something with the bleed-proof white as well as some additional pigment ink on this scene. All right, now it's getting loud out here because the gardeners are outside and it stays that way for a while, so I'm going to do this entire lesson in time lapse. Sorry, I couldn't think of it. All right, so let's get to it and let's have some fun. Okay, that was a fun scene to do, learning a little bit more about photo stamping all the time in terms of what it can take, and I don't know, all the photographs are going to be different too. I mean, if you're going with a, you know, a variety of different backgrounds in here, so kind of learning what pieces look like over certain types of values in terms of light and dark, color schemes and whatnot. This photograph right here is kind of more grayscale, and I'm guessing that it's a color photograph, that it just, you know, it was a gray sky and whatnot, because this is back in the days of probably film, so I don't think someone was shooting in black and white photography at that time. I mean, they could have, but the person that did these, I don't think so. But anyways, what I did in terms of containment, okay, is I add a little bit of a vignette on the side, and I used just a cosmetic foundation brush here. I felt that that would go on a little bit lighter and more delicate than a sponge application of it, okay? But with this emulsion coating, what I found is I kind of fought it a little bit, because the emulsion coating really sucks the ink out of your applicators, and it dries seemingly on the surface really quickly. But what I found was that if I kind of worked it for a little while, it seemed to kind of manipulate the surface a little bit, where I can kind of spread it around more evenly. Otherwise, I felt like I was getting kind of, I don't know, really kind of harsh applications, you know, like that or something like that. But I found that if I kept kind of working it on the paper, it did spread around okay, where I got just a little tip right there. All right, so that little bit of a vignette, I feel, contains this image, okay, this composition in general, okay? And I did it in black because I stamped my image in black. Okay, now in terms of additional embellishment and enhancement of this photograph, I think it looks okay if you just stamp your imagery on top of a photograph, and you can stop right there. But I felt that dimensionally, okay, bringing in these things like the white pigment ink light beam in here, which is kind of an afterthought. I wasn't really planning on doing it because I thought it would be too light in here for it to show up. I thought it'd need to be darker up here, but I thought it looked okay. It's a little bit more subtle. But those pigment ink applications down here amongst the you know, the crashing waves on those rocks, I thought looks pretty good. And then I used some of that additional pigment ink around these clouds. So if you use these things like that, if you apply a certain medium somewhere within the scene, if it kind of stands out strange, then if you apply it in other areas, it'll bring a continuity to those applications, and I think it works out okay. Some of the splatter painting, you know, crashing waves and water scenes are a really great excuse to use some bleed-proof white, and this is basically just an opaque white watercolor, okay? And what I did was I just, with a simple old toothbrush splatter painting technique, I splattered some of those little spots, or some of that paint, down in this area around these crashing waves, and I think that makes it look a little bit more three-dimensional instead of, you know, what's a dimensional looking image right here, but that enhancement, I just think makes it look so much better, okay? So, and also what I did was I did a little bit of coloring in. I took some black, I don't know, sometimes when stamping these images onto the photo paper, I get a little bit of that fisheye effect. Due to the chemistry of the paper and dye-based ink combination, but I just went in there and filled it in with some black. But I also added some grays down here in the water, knowing that I was probably going to do some of this bleed-proof white splatter painting down here. So unless this area down here, or your photograph in this case, is a little bit like kind of a medium to darker tone, if it's really light, that light, white on light, doesn't really stand out very much, so I colored it in a little bit. And then the white pigment ink also shows up a little bit more. But I did retain some of the light and dark down here. I didn't just color everything in down there. But again, you know, as far as talking about dimension, those extra textures down here I think really add to the overall spirit of this piece in terms of it looking a little bit more dimensional. Okay, now these branches in here I stamped in a Versafine black. I wanted to go for something really dark, and the Versafine ink is a pigment ink, and it's black, and I thought that looked it looked a little bit darker, and in this case, it allows me to stamp kind of a thicker ink over the top of that texturized surface, because those little specks down there, however thin they are dimensional because they are dried up paint, and that paint really dries fast, by the way. So I just stamped right over it with the Versafine, and then what I did was I went in with my little white gel pen and I added some additional highlighting on some of these branches, make those branches seem a little bit dimensional, and it kind of brings them out forward in terms of the scene. So all really easy techniques, and these are really fun techniques too. I love splatter painting and whatnot, and I love using white gel pens. You know how people like writing with gel pens, a light gel pen or a white one or whatever on black paper? It's really fun to do, isn't it? But that's the same type of spirit, that going in and highlighting some areas on your images feels. So like on this lighthouse right here, when I was doing those little highlights, just kind of putting a little tinge on some of these areas, you can see the little highlight on the stamp itself, right? And you can see these windows in here are light. And all I did was I just went in there and I recovered those areas with the white gel pen, okay? So this area in here, that window, was the same tone as this out here, but suddenly I put a light in the interior of that lighthouse just with the little gel pen techniques. So really fun stuff. I'd recommend trying it out. If you don't have a printer, you can always take your photographs or whatnot off your phone or whatever to some 1-hour photo place. You can upload them online to places, I think, like Walgreens, if they still do those types of things, CVS, Costco, and whatnot, and have a bunch of these things printed out. You know, print out a few different types, you know, for some variation that you can kind of experiment with. The lighthouse happened to be a really good image for this one because it's fairly solid, and it, you know, it gives us some opportunity with these little window areas and these crashing waves down here in terms of the areas of you know, this oscillation of light and dark throughout here. But the main image itself is fairly solid, so it would stand up against, you know, stamping it over vast changes of value, you know, going from something really light to dark like that. And plus, you can also fill in again with some additional inks. All right. So anyways, hope you liked the video. Hope you liked the scene. Thanks as always for tuning into the channel. If you like this video, hope you like, share, and subscribe. If you have any questions, drop us a note in the comment section.